Hey everybody, just for context, I have been doing election integrity stuff that is sort of like local politics stuff in Pennsylvania for the past few years. I think what we're doing is important and impactful, but I don't see many other people talking about it outside our circles. So mostly for general education purposes, I will be doing a series of interviews with just regular people who I've been doing election integrity stuff with, asking them what they've been working on for the past few years. So without further ado, here we go. As I understand it, you've been doing politics a lot longer than you've been doing specifically election integrity, so tell me what got you into working for fair elections.
Well, the first time, I don't know about fair elections. The first time that I poll watched was 2020. That was the presidential election in 2020. And I signed up to be a poll watcher, and Don was the person that was training the poll watchers, and he and I talked about election integrity issues because I did have concerns about that. In fact, I recall writing a letter to Commissioner Leinbach expressing concerns about potential violence at the precincts because there was a lot of negative sentiments towards Donald Trump during that election. And I think a lot of people also on the Republican conservative side who liked Trump were concerned about violence against them. And I remember writing a letter to Commissioner Leinbach just urging him to work with the deputy, the sheriff's department, and to have as much security as they can have at the polling locations. But since I was a voter, I was involved politically in that. I would vote for in most elections, and I would do letter writing to our elected officials, county, city, well, I don't know about city, county, state, and federal offices.
You were saying 2020 election, worried about violence at the polls, and what was your reaction to those election results?
Well, only because I listened to testimony. If you recall, there was a senator from Pennsylvania who convened a meeting in Gettysburg, and there were expert witnesses that were looking at statistical improbabilities and other anomalies that suggested that the results of that election were not believable. And then there were other election integrity groups that had other information that suggested that the number of votes cast exceeded the number of registered voters, at least in some precincts and such. And then there were other nationwide reports of ballots being run through tabulating machines numerous times. There was a story regarding Pennsylvania elections where a commercial truck driver drove a shipment of ballots from Long Island, and he brought them into Harrisburg, I believe. His dispatcher or whoever was there refused to sign his paperwork and account for his transportation, and I think he had to take his break or whatever, and then his trailer went missing. And so I think it's still uncertain what happened to that trailer full of ballots. So there were a lot of anomalies like that made me suspicious about the results of the election. I certainly knew that there was a lot of sentiment against Donald Trump, so the results alone didn't explain it, but when I heard about all those people that were willing to stick their neck out and discuss issues, I became very suspicious that and believed that the results of that election should not be trusted.
Do you remember the names of which groups those were that were raising those issues early on, those concerns?
Well, I guess True the Vote. I think that's Pennsylvania based. I mean, there were other groups. I don't know the names of them offhand.
And you mentioned you were working with Dawn from our group before the 2020 election, is that right?
Correct.
Wow, see, he was active for a while. Do you know what he was doing up until that point? Anything he was doing before then?
Well, I know that he was addressing issues with the election board of Berks County. And I know he had concerns about mass mail-in ballots, which happened before the 2020 election. It made mass mail-in ballots permissible. He had suspicions about the machines and I guess an inability to really audit. And there were concerns about the drop boxes. There was a movie that was made called 2000 Mules, which showed how investigators that were working on behalf of the movie makers were able to demonstrate and show some video of people putting numerous ballots into ballot drop boxes. And that was illegal, I believe, in most states, if not all states.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that the number was very high in Philadelphia, and some of those ballots could have been completed and filled out by people who were not in the registry, or they were in the registry, but they were filled out on behalf of legitimate voters. So there was potential fraud there. If the people depositing those ballots in the drop boxes were honest people, there may not have been an issue with fraud, but it still could have been illegal. If, for instance, somebody was doing everybody in the neighborhood a favor and collected their ballots and gave it to one person to put in the ballot box because they didn't want to do it themselves, which is very suspect anyway. But he had concerns about that, and in Berks County, to the credit of the county commissioners at the time and the election board at the time, Berks County did have drop boxes that were staffed in county buildings, and they were staffed with deputy sheriffs. And I don't know what stage this was, if this was before or after the election. I know that he was pressing the election board to have video cameras there also. So he was committed to working with the election board and showing them all the vulnerabilities in the election system in Berks County and asking or pleading for reforms, procedures, processes that could address some of those concerns. So that's kind of that's my recollection, is that he was doing this work actually before that election. Like I said, I do remember having conversations because I was prepared to be a poll watcher in that election, and this fellow Don was the person that was doing the training.
So because you were looking at election concerns prior to 2021, there's not a lot of people that have been doing that, but because you've seen election concerns prior to that, quick question, how much of the fraud do you think was a result of the whole mail-in ballot thing that happened in the 2020 election, and how much has been there for years before then?
I don't know that if I'm in a position to know that. I mean, certainly the mail ballots, I think there were signs that a lot of the fraud could have been done in county offices or with as I said, the stuffing of the ballot boxes. I would imagine that, I've heard stories of out-of-state persons being bussed into polling locations in another state and voting on behalf of voters. I guess there are ways that you can find out which voters had not voted yet and which voters are unlikely to vote, and you could assume those names if you could pay people to do that. Now, so I don't, as far as the statistics go, I don't know what to say. But I would imagine that a lot of fraud did happen through the mail ballot system, but I'm sure there are other ways as well. And if there were ways that you could manipulate the tabulation results, that's something that would be beyond me to be able to speak on. But I believe that certainly is a potential area of fraud as well. And what you can't see, and this I would say with the other vendors that had provided voting machines in Berks County, I was always suspect of how can we have faith in the outcome of election when you can't really see what happens when you push the levers or the buttons and then register that vote on a machine? The fact that you have a ballot card where printing is on it, you use the ballot marking electronic device, and then you have your candidate selections on that card, you can at least be certain that the card printed the names of your candidates correctly, your selections. But how those are tabulated, that is the different question, because you don't know if the machine tabulates correctly. Now, the only thing you could do is if you did a hand count of the precincts afterwards, you could then verify that the tabulation done by the machines was correct. Sometimes when I add up a long list of numbers, I like to do it on paper so I don't forget how to actually do it, and then I'll check it with the calculator. And if the check is good, I'll be more secure in thought that I did the addition problem correctly and other calculations. So if I just do it by hand and don't do a calculator, I might do it a couple times just to make sure the numbers are coming out the same way as a check, to make sure that I didn't make a mistake. When the election board stands in the way of having that kind of verification, then I'm suspect that something might have gone wrong. Because, do you know what I mean? It makes me more suspicious.
Yeah. So, as I understand it, the Berks County group that Dawn started was connected with, I forget the name of the group that Cleta Mitchell had, but if I recall right, she wanted to create all of these county-level chapters of election integrity task forces, and Don Boguski's whole thing, shortly before I got involved with it, was one of those task forces. So do you know at what point exactly that happened?
No, I don't. And the election integrity, as you say, task force, we are a group of concerned citizen voters, but we are not incorporated. We are not a
Right.
501 organization. We have no budget. We have no salaries.
Yep.
We have no revenue. So we do have regular meetings, and I see the purpose as an opportunity to get support and feedback and let everyone know what projects we're working on in terms of election integrity. But we're really, we don't necessarily, in my opinion, have to agree on which direction we're going, and we can have disagreements too on what the priorities should be. So in a way, I like working like that, but there is a big sacrifice of time if you are going to confront some of these issues and really bring them to the attention of the election board and your elected state officials, state representatives and senators, and your federal office holders as well. But I can't really say more than that. I know there are statewide groups, and I forget, the name escapes me offhand, and I just had it. Fair Elections. What is the name
PA Fair Elections, the one.
PA, yes, PA Fair Elections. So
Yep.
they have a Zoom meeting on a regular basis, almost weekly as well, and people from various counties throughout the state have their own groups, and there is a sharing of information, what as far as what work they are doing, what goals they're trying to achieve, and it's an opportunity to give feedback and support, and to just gain some perspective from other counties and what they're doing. So I find that helpful to attend those meetings as well.
Yep, absolutely. I do like how our group has still kept meeting for so long, and people just work on things as they have interest, as they have energy, and just during our weekly Zoom meeting bring up whatever is relevant. You, for a long time, have been focusing on people who were told they've already voted, they need to use provisional ballot, either that or people who have had some other issue at the polling place for whatever reason, needed to do a provisional ballot. Tell me about what you're doing with that.
Well, I'm aware of a couple dozen precincts in the 2024 general election where there were voters who had their provisional ballots rejected because the poll book apparently told the voter that they already had voted, and I don't know if that meant counter-voted or voted at a precinct. But given that fact, they had to vote the provisional ballot. And then there was a class of voters who were told at the precinct that they had applied for and I guess received, or they believe they had no reason to believe that they didn't receive the mail ballot. So they were flagged in the poll book as having voted by mail, and therefore they could not vote in the machines unless they surrendered their mail ballot. And they were not able to do that, or presumably they were not able to do that. In a case like that, they would have to vote on the provisional ballot. Now what happens is that the provisional ballots, the statute is either 6 or 7 days, and I'm not sure now which it is. But after the election, within 6 or 7 days, as the statute reads, the election board must adjudicate those provisional ballots and make a determination. They have to make sure that the person did not vote in any other manner. In those several dozen precincts that I was aware of these particular voters, I think in total there were 86 voters that were affected. In all those cases, the provisional ballots were rejected because the inspection, the voters' record showed that they did vote by mail ballot, or they did vote either at the counter or at a polling location previously on election day. If that be the case, I was concerned that there are several explanations that should be investigated. The one explanation might be that an individual attempted to vote twice, and that would be illegal. Another explanation might be that somebody intercepted a mail ballot or requested a mail ballot on behalf of a legitimate voter. And if that be the case, there would be a fraud and a crime there, and the person, the legitimate voter, if they are the one that filled out the provisional ballot, they would have been disenfranchised. And then another explanation is that somebody could have gone to the poll earlier and voted on behalf of a legitimate voter. That would be a fraud and a crime there. Or I guess the person filling out the provisional ballot could have attempted to vote on behalf of a legitimate voter, and that would be a crime. And I guess a last explanation would be there was some kind of an error or mistake made on part of the poll, the precinct, the inspector of elections, I should say. The inspector of elections may have made a mistake, or somebody at election services, a clerk there may have made a mistake, or some other problem occurred. But did I answer your question there, or that is what I was concerned about? I did file a right to know request with the county, and I was rejected by that. And I had discussions with the election board on several occasions about this, and they, I guess through their attorney, described my concerns as hypothetical, and they were not willing to do anything more than that. As I read and interpret the statute concerning the duties and responsibilities of the election board, when you do have suspicious circumstances like that, they should be investigated and referred to the district attorney. And now my right to know request was denied. I am appealing that. I did file a formal appeal, and it will be arbitrated. I requested an arbitration rather than just a written response to my appeal. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm anxious to see where that will go. Did I answer your question there?
Yeah. Speaking of right to know requests, you've filled out quite a few over the years. How many do you think you filled out total?
I don't know, maybe 8 of them or something like that. I don't know. I just started doing that, I think, a year or so ago. So I tell you what, there's a lot of paperwork involved because when you file a right to know request, you will get a response from the open records officer for the agency. In this case, it would be Berks County election department, I guess, and they will be they will be quoting court decisions defending their position. And if I do an appeal, goes to the secretary of the State Department of the Pennsylvania Department of State, and the agency involved has opportunity to file additional documentation and so forth. And so lawyers are getting involved, and everybody that has any interest in the case is submitting some kind of a documentation. So I have a binder with all my right to know requests in it and the paperwork involved, and it's one of the largest binders I have. So
yeah, I had an idea for the amount of paperwork involved, and with the amount that I've seen mentioned, I was actually under the impression that you had filled out hundreds of right to know requests, but a single request is just that intensive. That really should be made easier.
It is, and I guess I would understand why not, because if it was too easy, people would be asking for things, and there's no way they could accommodate everybody. So they do make it difficult. I have received things from the county. I've also negotiated. I asked for less if they would give it to me without any more work involved, and they agreed to that. And I remember going into election services and seeing some documents that I wanted to see. If you take on a right to know, you shouldn't give up, because I think the default is to deny you, and that is to protect them, I guess. And,
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, I was advised not to give up, to go through the appeal process, and it takes a while for me to write appeal or even a right to know. I want to be as precise as possible with the language. You are advised when you fill out the form, and the forms are online, but they do advise you have to have specific time frames and specific documents that you're looking for, so you have to be very descriptive in what you're looking for. You cannot ask questions. They're not answering questions. They are just giving you documents that the statute does not prohibit you from having. And I'll give you, one example of something that I asked for was of the list of the voters needing assistance at the polls. Well, the statute does prohibit that. And, excuse me. I'm not sure. In some cases, you can never touch the actual ballot. I have asked for the tapes of the machines. The tabulator machines, at the end of the day, they print. The printer tabulates. Well, the machine tabulates, then prints the results for the precinct, and a copy of that is made for the election board. A copy is made for the minority inspector, and the precinct is supposed to post a copy on a window or door so that voters from the precinct can see the tabulated results from their precinct. And sometimes they will print another copy for a poll watcher, but I had wanted to see some of those, and I forget my thinking on it. This was some time ago, but I wanted to see if there were anomalies that just seemed impossible. I didn't find any, but that, I believe, is the reason why I requested certain precincts to see what their printed tabulation reports were.
I know you've also spoken to a lot of lawmakers in Harrisburg. Do you have any highlights from that you want to share?
Well, I have not spoken to a lot. I wish I had spoken to a lot. My state representative, he and I have talked about election integrity issues. He is an election integrity advocate and had refused to sign Act 77. So he's one of two that refused to sign that.
And which one was that? Which rep?
David Zimmerman.
Okay.
So his office had called me today, in fact, and there is I would like some help if I could arrange some appointments. I do call the offices of state reps and state senators, and I have copied them or included them in certain email letters that I've sent to the Secretary of State or to other persons. And the purpose of my following up is to try to get an appointment. Now, the problem with that, if they're not in my district, they can easily refuse to see me.
Right.
So it would be helpful if I can talk some people into making that phone call and accompanying me, even if they don't want to do the lion's share, let's say, of the discussion. And I have talked with a Democrat lawmaker about election integrity issues, and I think she was very receptive. I don't want to name her, but I think she was very receptive to the concerns that I and another gentleman brought forward to her concerning some of the issues. And some of that, in particular, what I talked before, if that pre-canvass begins on election day, if there are fraudulent ballots in that mix, by the end of the day or early the next morning, they will be unretrievable. And that means some illegal ballots can get into the system, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point. You can't remove them, and you can't give somebody an opportunity to vote twice or appear to vote twice, you know what I mean? And we discussed that before. So it is a problem that it's one of many problems, and I do want to just have that opportunity to discuss that with as many lawmakers as I can, and I could use some help in that. That's something that frustrates me a little bit and I think the reason is people just don't feel comfortable doing that in the first place, even calling their state rep or state senator. But I think it is something that has to be done to put pressure. And I think a lot of voters don't understand that we do have to pressure our elected officials to do the right thing. If not, they will find other priorities to work on, and it may be their own agenda. But unfortunately, I think the normal voter in Berks County just doesn't understand all the vulnerabilities that are associated with elections. And I think people might appreciate the fact that the outcomes of elections can mean big money, financial gain for some, and financial gain for others, and which explains why there may be a lot of motivation to tamper with election machines or the process. And I think until we recognize that that the default attitude of the voter is that we should be suspicious of election process, and we should expect and demand what comes as close as possible to 100% transparency, and that when there is questionable things that go on with the machines, that it should be easy to request a hand recount, and that volunteers should be willing to step up to do a hand recount if necessary.
That I still remember, I think it was 2022, when Berks County Republicans tried to get enough petition signatures to get that hand recount, and the county government itself opposed it in the courts. And not only that, opposed an appeal in the courts. I still wonder what motive they had for fighting so hard against that.
Well, you could look at motive that they were aware of fraud and they were trying to hide that. Now, I'm not saying that there was, but there certainly is that kind of appearance. Another explanation is that if you don't certify by a certain time, there's going to be hell to pay, I guess, and that could be political hell, or from the State Department, the Pennsylvania Department of State, for delaying in being able to certify. So you have that dynamic. Also, depending upon what party is bringing the allegation or the complaint to the court, the other opposition party may see it as a ploy to question what they would like to see as the legitimate votes, for instance. So I think there could be great political backlash and backlash from, like I said, the state Department of Pennsylvania Department of State. So it would be a very uncomfortable thing to do, and if they could get away with just finding a reason to squelch it, I think that's how they opted to handle the case. Yeah. However, in a case like that, let me say this: going forward, in a case like that, I think the decision to oppose the complaint and what was requested was the opening of the ballot box to hand count in those certain precincts. If there is a decision to oppose that, I think the Sunshine Law does demand that that decision be made at a public meeting and that the debate pertaining to that decision precede it, and that how the election board members vote on that particular issue, that should be a public record. And in this case, I don't believe there was any public debate about that. The Sunshine Law does allow for executive sessions that are closed to the public when you are discussing real estate issues and legal questions. So getting advice from the solicitor's office is a private matter, or closed to the public, let's say. But the actual decision to oppose such a request should be a public one, in my opinion, as I understand the Sunshine Law anyway. And if I'm wrong about that, I would like to know that. So, but that's how I read the Sunshine Law.
Is there anything else from all you've done for election integrity that you want to highlight?
Well, I think it was a success that you and others were involved in giving notice to persons on the voter rolls in Berks County that were also registered voters in other Pennsylvania counties or in other states, and to ask them to voluntarily remove themselves. Am I correct on that's what you were working on, Mitch?
Yep, right.
Yes. So I think that was a very worthwhile project, and it engaged people that did not necessarily have to know too much about the election code, but they instinctively would know that you shouldn't be registered to vote and be able to vote in more than one state or more than one county. That would only make sense.
There were a lot of people who got active working on that.
Yes, so I think that was a very worthwhile project, and I think the county also provided a list of over 1,000 people. I think that they sent notices out because of what a member of our group did with a spreadsheet that they could work off of, and that they sent notices out that they would have the voter, if they attempted to vote in Berks County, they'd have to affirm under penalty of perjury, I guess, that they were still residing in Pennsylvania. And I guess if they didn't vote and didn't do that, that they would eventually be taken off the rolls. So I would say that would be another win for what we were trying to do. And I think I did mention that there was some pressure put on the election board to have cameras at the drop boxes and to limit those drop boxes as well. And I would say that is a win for Berks County and the voters of Berks County.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say this too. I don't know what happens with poll watching in the past. I think what we're trying to do is engage poll watchers to train them. I did tell you, and this is how we started this interview, I did tell you that first time I was a poll watcher at the 2020 presidential election. And now I knew something about the law because I was a judge of elections several decades ago. And there was a training document that I reviewed before I did that. But I filled out a report, sent that in about some irregularities that I did notice. I have no idea what happened to that report. I don't even know if it was read by anybody. What I will say about our group is that I believe that the reports that we get from the poll watchers do not just evaporate. We do look at them. I often call the poll watcher for clarification, or if there's a witness that the poll watcher identifies, I will call them. And then I use that information to address the election board, because it is information about irregularities, something that should not be going on in a poll. And it at least gives the election board and the director of elections the opportunity to enhance their training and to correct an issue if it is easily correctable. So I guess I'm pleased that we do that. I'm pleased that we have a role in that. We are trying to work with in our case, Republican poll watchers to have them be aware of what they should be looking for and to report on that. And we have that by an electronic app that you can use on your phone or your computer. And we also have a phone number to individuals who man those phones and take complaints from the poll watchers, complaints or questions from the poll watchers and others that might call in to register a concern. And as of the last election, we've also tried to encourage greeters who are outside the polling place to be aware of concerns that voters have and to communicate that to our help number that we have active on election day, or to the poll watcher if there is a poll watcher that is at that particular precinct. So the whole concept of a poll watcher is almost useless if there's no follow-up on problematic issues that they are actually witnessing. So anyway, I think that's a good thing that we're involved in.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, the information that comes from that is really useful in talking to commissioners and legislators. I see that we're getting sort of close to time, so is there anything else you want to say before we cut it?
No, I think this would be a good place to end. Thank you for the interview, and
absolutely, yeah.
I hope some people can get something from it.
Yeah, thank you for coming on as well.
You're welcome.
See you soon.
All right.